So, Edward is a character I don't really think about much. He started out as the first engine on the railway, then was criticized for his age by the bigger and stronger engines. Then, Gordon got stuck on a hill, and Edward came to 1, help him out, and 2, put him in his place. He helped James in a runaway after James said he was slow, and his biggest stride was helping a bunch of passengers in a terrible storm, even if that meant harming himself in the process. Now, seasons 1 to 5 were nice to Edward. They retold his character arc from the Railway series, and even in season 5, when he didn't really appear much, he was still in character. Wasn't in Magic Railroad, though. It was only until season 6 where he started to change. He became less wise and more worryful and pathetic, and everyone's views on Edward's changed as well. After Edward's exploit, Gordon and the bigger engines fully respected Edward.
Duck and Boko saw to it that Edward was left in peace. Gordon and James remained respectfully silent.
But in Edward the Really Useful engine, they go back to hating on him for no reason.
Edward is a useless old steam pot, Gordon sniffed. He should be retired. And the other big engines agreed with him.
Seasons 7 and 8 were better to Edward, like Edward's Brass Band and Edward the Great. Season 9 had Saving Edward, which wasn't really that good, but it wasn't until season 10 where Edward had a flat-out terrible episode. This episode being Edward Strikes Out. This episode made Edward a complete ass for no reason, but to not spoil anything else, let's get into why Edward Strikes Out is the worst Edward episode. The episode starts off with Edward arriving at the docks to pick up a train of pipes. A new crane has arrived on the island, and Gordon immediately badmouths the crane, saying,
"But he has no engine. He can't move unless another engine pulls him."
Yeah, you guys have been using cranes for years now. Why are you now noticing this? Edward, for some reason, says that he won't be useful for anything. Gordon agrees with Edward, then Percy arrives next to Edward. Both Gordon and Edward restate their claims, and Gordon storms off. Maybe Percy will be a shed of light in this episode.
What's a new-funneled nuisance, Edward?
Then Edward goes to collect his train, which is placed next to the crane. The crane, whose name is Rocky, introduces himself to Edward and asks if he can go with Edward and help him out. Edward says no and calls him a
Newfangled nonsense.
He then storms off, but oh noes, the pipes weren't tied down properly. Edward, you buffoon. Later, Edward was approaching a signal, but was 1, still focusing on Rocky, and 2, was going too fast. When the signal changes to red, Edward halts and his pipes spill out of the trucks and go onto the tracks. Now, we're gonna play a little game here. What does Edward do now? Does he A, get the new crane to help out and apologize to him, B, get the fat controller to help out, or C, call for Diesel 10? If you chose any of these, you are wrong. Womp womp. He gets his driver to get Harvey, which, while being a crane engine, he isn't really that strong. No offense to you, Harvey fan club. This idea obviously doesn't work and gets Thomas and Emily stuck onto the other side of the tracks. Thomas, being smart, tells Edward to get Rocky, but Edward says no, and holy shit, Gordon, watch out! Harvey basically says, yeah, no, I'm not doing this. And Thomas again tells Edward to get Rocky. Edward, finally gaining a single working brain cell, rushes back to the docks to get Rocky. Then they both leave to go pick up the mess.
Go get him, Edward!
We actually do get a nice montage of the two going through the main line. The two get back to where the accident happened and puts Gordon back onto the tracks. Not sure why Thomas is always shocked when there's an engine being put on the tracks. He's been doing this since like season 1. Am I the only one who noticed that? Rocky, being the Chad that he is, lifts up all the pipes and puts them back.
I was silly to think you were newfangled nonsense, wished Edward to Rocky.
Yes, you were. And it all ends with them blowing their whistles, and they're all happy. Yay!
Yay! A Pimenel adventure!
I was originally going to conclude this myself, but one of my good friends is a huge Edward fan, so I thought I'd let him conclude this video. Take it away, Magic Road Studios.
Edward Strikes Out was just an overall bad episode for one of the franchise's most important characters, such as Edward. This episode just shows us the problem with Edward in this era. They just didn't really know what to do with him, really, other than being just an old weak engine or an asshole for no reason at all. My theory is that James was the original lead for this episode, but they realized they needed to give Edward a lead role. And plus, James appeared more in this season than him. So they just went, screw it, just put Edward as the main lead, because why not? He's a main character and he's in the theme song, so why not? Unlucky Tugs, Sodor's Finest, goes into more detail about Edward in this era and why he was treated horribly. Okay, Timothy, so do I get my paycheck for being in here?
No.
You son of a...
Oh, hey, Peter. What are you clenching in that fist there?
Ribbity.